You know, the holidays are a lot of fun in the hill country, especially if you've grown up in San Marcos and still have family here. It's reunion time with our childhood classmates at our local bars while the majority of the student population is gone. That's when you can actually make all the green lights down Hopkins without stopping. 'Tis the season, y'all. Welcome to COSMRadio, citizens of San Marcos, locals and legends, to bring you a little closer to the divine essence this holiday season and get to know your neighbors. Now, for some of us, the holiday season is also a time when deep feelings arise, when old letters and lost bottles wash ashore, when old lovers come knocking at your door, history with friends and family. But that's what eggnog's for, right? Right? But for many, it's especially hard if we've lost a loved one or if we're alone. So for this episode, I really wanted to emphasize the wow factor of the spiritual world. It's a debated topic, and probably will be until either A, we die and are totally conscious, or B, we die, consciousness ceases, and none of this would even matter. So for this episode, I have two stories that may challenge your usual beliefs, even if it's just for a second. I'm sure we've all mulled over crazy coincidences and the possibility that the spirit world could be working hand in hand with us. You've heard the term, when life flashes before your eyes. It's based on a theme that happens during a near-death experience. It's like your life plays out before you in its entirety, and it's an incredible eye-opener into relationships with loved ones. I'm sure you've heard of near-death experiences. One of our longtime residents and river activists, Nancy Moore, is here to tell us about her incredible near-death experience and the lessons of love that we all need to hear before we start the new year. So maybe we don't always learn our lessons in one lifetime, that maybe we need to live lives over and over to keep learning lessons. It's rare, but there are some radical past life memory tales out there, and well, we happen to have such a person with a story right here, and this may be one of the more detailed stories I'd ever heard. Later in the show, we'll interview Maxfield Baker about his extraordinary past life memory he'd had as a child. First, here's Nancy.
As talking about the car accident that I was involved in 1984. I picked up my son from Montessori school. He was 5 years old, and it was about 1 o'clock on Friday. We're heading to Austin. I just had gone on I-35 and said, "Jason, you better take a nap in the back seat." So he just crawled in the back seat to take a nap. And I just had crossed the Blanco River Bridge. They were working on it. I couldn't see really what was ahead of us, but when I crossed the bridge, there was just this huge thing flying through the air and hit us head on. Working for an electrical company. It was a big truck that had been driven by a 21-year-old that had gone to Austin to pick up supplies. He had picked up a fifth of whiskey, came back. He had drank the whole bottle on the way up there and back. He was really drunk, and he was southbound. I was northbound. He lost control of the truck. There was no guard It was just open then, and went across the median, and that turned the truck upside down, and the driver fell out his window onto the grassy median, and then the truck was just flying through the air, and that's what hit us head on. It hit the front of our car and over the top, and apparently there was one thing left to be salvaged out of our car, and it was a back rear light. I left my body. Everything slowed down. And I was out of my body, and everything cleared up. The colors were incredible. Everything was sharp and brilliant and shiny and beautiful, and nature, you could see nature so alive, and there was the river. I could hear people in the line of cars that were praying for whoever was involved.
So were you like a bystander? Were you observing this from above? Okay.
Above.
And the colors were just
brilliant. And there were people that were cussing because they were in that long line. They were in a hurry. You know, I could feel all of that. I even could see license plates numbers, you know, of the cars. And then I started noticing that there was like this thin, tiny little silvery thread. It's kind of an opalescence little thread that was connecting people and cars and rivers and rocks and trees. And it was all connected with this precious, light, thin thread. What I've learned now, knowing a lot of people that have had death experiences, that really the metaphors that we believe in, it goes with us, you know, in the first parts of our leaving this world. And as a child, my parents had a drive-in movie theater, and we would work at the theater, and I would always watch by the big screen. The sun would set over here, and they were looking for when the sun sets, we can start the movie. And to me as a child, it was when there was low-lying clouds and the sun was setting and the rays would come up. Then for me, I thought, well, the Golden Gates are open, and that's when all the people that have died, they're going to the Golden Gates. And so, you know, coming back to this experience in '84, I was going toward the sun. It was so beautiful, and I was happy. I just could not believe the beauty of this world. I kept going further and further away from the earth, and pretty soon I was going through space, and I started hearing tones. Well, every planet in our solar system hums a tone, and it was this orchestrated symphony of such balance and pristine beauty. And then I realized I was traveling with someone. I was not alone. I never saw the person, but I started talking to this person. And I said, well, what is this that we are floating through? What is this? He said, well, you could call this the ocean of love. And as soon as he said the ocean of love, then that magnified as far as a teaching, as far as knowledge of what is the ocean of love. Well, all this space is the ocean of love that we think is empty. All the space in our cells that we think are empty. Everything, we are in the ocean of love. And then I saw that it's man's mind that can believe we're separate from that. And it's only in the mind of man that can create that separation. I turned back I'm still going. I turned back and then I saw the earth. Oh my God. And it got smaller and smaller. And then I started seeing all these angels around the earth. And I saw UFOs around the earth and like more intelligent beings that were around the earth. And I said to this person with me, I said, why is it that that's the only planet in our solar system that has anything like that going on? And he said, because we are in a free will zone,
right,
and that we've been given the power to choose. The level of thought can change the tone of the sphere of the earth. And instead of being in harmony with the solar system, it could go flat. And the only thing that can do that is there will be an overbalance of fear instead of love. And that is the choice that people will have to come to, that they can either choose fear or they can choose love. And that comes in all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And he said that that's why the angels are working, and that's why the other civilizations that have come to do what they can to help us grow as a species. Choose love.
To learn the way of love, yeah.
Yes. It's the last school here on this earth.
So in this experience, when did you snap out of it? When did reality come back? Or I guess that was reality, right?
Yeah, that is a reality, yes. Well, the person I was with asked me if I was complete with this life. And I said, oh, I don't think so. I think I still have a lot of work to do. I mean, I was not thinking of my family. I wasn't thinking of my 5-year-old in the car. I was in this ecstasy of love, unconditional love. But I said, I'm not through. And he started talking to me about, okay, then I want you to start breathing. I want you to, so he started helping me come back into this world. The last thing that he said was to remember that everything was going to be all right. Then I blinked and I was in the ditch. It was a blink is all it was. And it was like changing lenses on a camera. It's like you change lens and you see something different. It was that much of it, that the spirit world is that close. It is with us all the time. So then I blinked and I was in the ditch and there was a woman holding my hand and kind of rubbing my heart, and she goes, oh, hello, darling. You've been in a car accident, and your son is about to go in the ambulance first. And as soon as she said, my son, I felt so guilty. I remember the energy of guilt entering this body that was so in a static state of unconditional love that I had been washed clean with any of that earthly experience, and guilt came in and it entered my right leg. My knee was crushed and that started hurting. It kept going. The excruciating pain of the things broken. My back was broken. My pelvis was in 2 pieces. It was, all of that became excruciating pain. And it took my breath away. And I said to this lady, I said, I think I'm going to think about this guilt tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I said that, the energy just went through my body and left. And it went right back up to the ocean of love. And it was like a fireworks coming, just dispersing into the ethers. And I went, wow. And I was telling her about that. I said, we can let go. We don't have to hang on to guilt and shame. And then I knew my son was, then the voice, I could hear his voice saying, remember, everything was going to be okay. And I could hear my son crying. And so I went to him in spirit and whispered in his ear. I said, I am with you, and everything's going to be okay, and you can stop crying now. And me in the ditch heard him stop crying.
COSMRadio is glad to be a part of the Central Texas community. We will be streaming live soon from kzsm.org on Sundays at 3. If you have any stories of your own, let us know. Email us at COSMRadio, that's COSMRadio, @gmail.com. We are currently looking for intriguing tales about love, missed connections, dates gone wrong. It's okay, we'll keep it anonymous. And if you don't have a partner, what are you into? Traveling? Odd collectibles? We'd like to know. Let us grab your story, long or short, and we can try and fit it in. So to stay tuned for our show themes, schedule, and latest podcasts, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/COSMRadio or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Spread the word, share the stories, and share COSMRadio. Thanks for tuning in.
We drove to the new hospital together, and I was, I was so still in spirit and so expanded, and I could go into spirit by blinking. I learned that. And just shifting that awareness and then also shifting out of fear of what was happening back into the unconditional love, and I had no pain. If I got into fear, I was in excruciating pain. But if I chose love, I didn't have any pain in my body. And the only time that I blacked out was when they gave me anesthesia to do surgery. The hospital brought in a psychologist from Austin because they knew odd things were happening. I know that there were so many flowers and there were balloons everywhere, and people were trying to come from the city, and they had to put me in a room that wasn't listed. And flowers were lined up all on that third floor, up on both sides of the hallway and on my room. We were like the poster kids of what had happened. There were several times, I can't remember how many times, but people told me that they ended up in my room. They were driving on the highway and something told them to go to the hospital and go to the third floor, that I had a message for them. So I would say, well, what's the message for them? Spirit would tell me something, and they would go on with their life. Well, then that's when the hospital itself wanted me to be evaluated to see if I was crazy. One morning a nurse came in and she was very distraught and upset. I could tell it. I said, what's wrong? She said, oh, nothing, darling. And she kept working around. I said, there's really something big. Please tell me. And she started crying. She said, I'm not supposed to tell you my problems, but it's really not that big. But I've lost my stethoscope, and I think a doctor just picked it up by mistake. And my dad gave it to me at nursing and school graduation. And my dad didn't have much money, and he just saved money to get me that stethoscope, and I just know I've lost it. And I said, oh, let me look. I shut my eyes, and I could see it, that it was like on a cabinet between two halls, and it was a pass-through, and that she had laid it down there. And I described the place, and I said, there's no lights on in there. And she said, I know exactly where you're talking. And she went and got it and brought it back in and said, oh my God, thank you.
So you are almost, I guess, are you still able to kind of do this?
I can.
Wow. And so...
And the spirit never has left.
Okay. So
it's a continuing. I can definitely get in the world and get into fears and, but it's still, I'm not separate from it. And to see the balance of things. And that's what I've talked so much about the city, because I can see it tipping into greed and tipping into, we're not seeing the sacred, we're not seeing the love, the unconditional love of Creator. With the prayer ceremonies that we've done here, I know that, Dr. Emoto and how we think we can infuse our water with negativity and the water crystals are all broken up. Well, I know that the San Marcos River goes to the ocean and then it's spread out, and then all of that eventually spreads around the world. So what we do here, what we think here, we don't even have to be in prayer by the river. It's the vibration of the people here. And our river needs the people as much as the people need the river. That's why I've come back into the politics of the time, because we're at a crucial balancing stage in San Marcos, and I think it's a microcosm of what's happening in the whole world, because the whole world is turning into greed and fear and control and blah, blah, blah. We see it all the time. So I get to meet people like you, people like Ashley and Tom that created the Wild Rice Festival. You guys already have it. I had to come back to it. You already have that vibration knowing. If our generation has done it right, then maybe we built a little bridge that we can say that you can walk over. It's needed now, but there will be the time of letting go of the old world and walking into the new. And I know the golden age will come again, and I have no idea how that's going to happen. It's so dark now.
Yeah.
It only takes enough of us knowing that we're connected in that web of life, that it's like that 100th monkey thing, that it takes the 100th monkey to learn, and then it's a mass knowing. So if we can, enough of us can connect, that it will be the shield of unconditional love. The Indian people told me, said, you have to learn how to be human beings, being human, that you just aren't born with it. We just come in and we have to learn how to be human. And so this is a place that offers that to remember. It's the remembering and forgetting. Gray-spotted eagle. This is after these journeys, after this death experience, and the last time I was in the spirit world was on a Sunday morning. I was still in the hospital, and I woke up and the sun was rising. So I was looking out over the city out of the window, and the city was golden. It was a golden city, and I knew the sun was hitting it, but I've never seen it like that, or since I've never seen it like that. And that energy is like coming toward me in my window, and it took my breath away, and I was trying to brace myself like it's going to hit me or something, and Spirit said, just allow this to come in. And so I did, and what came in was a huge bird. and this bird picked me up out of my hospital bed. And I know this sounds so like I was on some kind of hallucinogenic drug, but I was not on any of the painkillers. This was later. But I closed my eyes and I opened them back up, and I was riding on her wing, and I could see this huge head here. I couldn't even see the other wing. I could see this left wing going up and down, and then I looked down. It was like so slow and graceful, the wing, but I looked down and we were going so fast. The earth was moving so fast underneath us. She flew me to different lands and to different sacred areas, the Machu Picchu. I met certain people. She took me to Egypt, and she flew me through the colors of Egypt, and it was just being washed by lapis lazuli and the colors of, and then gold of Egypt, and turquoise and white. And I could tell it was cleansing my physical body. That was a huge experience with her. She brought me back to my bed, and I could feel that would be the last time I would be in the spirit world for a long time. And that's when the sadness, and I didn't want her to go, and that's when I realized that I would stay here on the earth in this time, and what a challenge it is because of so many of us believing we're separate. It creates a density. So the message is just to remember who we are, that the world is full of forgetters and rememberers, and our job is to remember. So what happened to me, the Spirit told me that I would be working with Indian people here in America. After working with pipe ceremonies, with Vision Quest, with rites of passages, with going to the Sundance, and I met an indigenous elder that had come out of New Zealand that was going to walk their prophecy journey around the world. They didn't know when that was going to happen. There was prophecies of how that would set up, how the stars had to align in a certain way. And then they would know that it was time to walk their prophecy journeys. And so it did happen that way, and then sent out their spiritual elder to walk the prophecy journeys. So it took the masculine and the feminine to walk these journeys, and that's a huge story in itself, but that did happen. It wasn't easy to do, and I didn't know what I had anything to do with the New Zealand indigenous people, but the more I said yes, every step was hard, and it was yes, okay, I'll go on that journey, okay, yes, I'll do that. But then it was the unflowering of my own heart, and it was the beauty of how one man and one woman from totally different worlds could come together and connect with the Creator, and how that creates a foundation of well-being on this planet. And the ceremony is an ancient ceremony. It's 12 sisters in a circle that correspond to a celestial realm, and they just come from all walks of life and all religions and beliefs, and just say, yes, I'll stand in that circle and I will say a prayer from my heart. So everything that of the wisdom teachings, they just became alive in my being. And the depth of understanding that was, it was so different and so profound.
And that's the sense I get from a lot of experiencers, is just the awe that they have from their experience. And
Yes.
It's almost hard to relate to others after experience like that, because you're so impacted and you have this knowledge.
Yes.
For those of us living in San Marcos, Texas, Nancy Moore has a lot of insight for our community in terms of our town's growth, how we treat the river, and how we treat each other. So keep that in mind as we head into 2017. Coming up next, we'll speak with Maxfield Baker about his past life memory as a young child. So stay tuned. Before you drive off and get stuck in traffic, connect to the COSMRadio podcast and listen to an hour of great local tales for anyone in the Central Texas area or anyone in general. While we are looking for different kind of stories of love this season, we are also looking for tales about creeks and caves in Central Texas. I mean, it could be anything from about how a creek got its name to someone having a close call while spelunking, or maybe it's something no one's heard about yet, like the discovery of Spanish treasure, or maybe a ghost. Email us at cosmradio@gmail.com. Share Cosm Radio and tune into our weekly live streaming Sundays at 3 p.m. kzsm.org. You want to start from the beginning? I know that it was a trip with your dad, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is this crazy memory that you have?
So when I was 3 years old, we were living in San Miguel in Mexico. And for whatever reason, my dad had this Greyhound bus, and he went to Belize to go and sell this bus. And when he got down there, he did some tourist stuff, took some pictures. He comes back to San Miguel and like going through these pictures. I remember like we're all hanging out in the bed and we're looking at these little Polaroids that he had kind of gotten put together. And I start telling my parents like, oh man, I've been there before. I know what that is. I remember this. And they were, just very inquisitive about it and gave me every opportunity to just kind of flesh out that feeling or those ideas that I was getting. And so it started off with my mom asking, well, you said you were there, were we around? And I told them...
Wait, how old were you?
3.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 3 years old. My mom asked me, are we there? And I said, yeah, you were there, but we weren't a family. I seemed to indicate that I was of some sort of higher rank than them. And as my mom probed more and more into it, I at one point depicted this situation as being with people with beads and feathers. And then they threw me into this big blue hole, and then I ended up in your tummy. I'm talking to my mom.
Really? So this is how you explained it to your mom?
Yeah. I again, being 3, you didn't really have the words.
And so exactly what were in the Polaroids? What were the pictures of?
It was pictures of the pyramids,
Okay.
and some like beach sandscapes.
And
so
where? Which pyramids?
in Palenque.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So they were pictures like from standing in the middle of the plaza, looking at these, couple ones that they had excavated. And so after telling this to my parents, my dad had to go back down to Belize to like finish up something with the bus or whatever. And so we go down there, and as we're, going to do the tourist thing, and my dad's taking me to these pyramids because I was so jazzed about it, I had started telling him that, oh, I know where we are, and, we need to go this way. The pyramids are just like on the other side of these trees. And he was like, yeah, you're right. They're right over there, and, we can just kind of take this road, I guess, instead of the way I was going to go. And we get to the pyramids, and my dad is just seeing this like feeling go over me, just getting more and more excited. And we pull over, and I get out and I just run up these pyramid steps. They could not have been held back. And I remember them being very steep and very difficult for me as a 3-year-old, but we get up in there and walk down into it, and I start talking to my dad about the treasure and how excited I am to see this treasure that, is mine, and I'm so happy to see it again. And we get down there, and the kind of box that it was being held in was there on display, but the tour guide there, or what have you, was explaining to us that the actual the things contained inside of it had been moved off site to be studied or something. And I was like, well, why did they move my treasure? And started kind of laying into this tour guide.
Was he in the middle of a tour and were you just butting in, be like, where's my treasure?
Yeah. And so, he goes on to say that we were in a high priest temple, and, that's who the treasure would have belonged to. And then, so, we go and we experience all this pyramid just kind of intensity. And then as we're there visiting, I talked to my dad about some other things that made this whole experience just seem more and more vivid. For instance, about the sharks down there being used as medicine for bone joints and stuff like that. Historically, the natives were using them to...
What, were they in some... Okay, maybe this is a different part of the story. I heard this on the documentary or something, but there was like water rivers going in there, and was that where they had the sharks?
They were called, I guess, like sleeping sharks, because they would position themselves in certain parts in the reef so that they could actually rest, because most sharks they keep moving to keep water going past their gills.
Oh, okay. Right.
But the other interesting part was the deep blue hole reference, that I mentioned to my mom, and about being thrown into there before I ended up in her stomach. And it took me a long time to hear about these in our anthropology classes, but the cenotes that they have down there have these rivers of sulfur that flow through them, and again, the natives believed that was kind of where the souls go to rest, kind of thing. So you have these deep, I don't know, it's just like a coincidence or what have you, but it's crazy that having said something like that at such a small age, and then, to as I'm growing older, like all these things keep falling into place.
Wow, so what was your dad thinking this whole time? Was he just astounded?
They must have been tripping. I mean, they're my parents are at a glance very, very hippie type people, and they, I think, were really astounded by this, and I think it's so neat how they fed into it, and at this point it's kind of a thing where I've just heard the story so many times, memories get so fuzzy, but my parents were very invested in talking to me about this, and my mom one year for my birthday even called into the George Norrie show and told the same story. You can go on his website and hear her rendition of it too.
Oh, wow.
And for my birthday, woke up and was like, I called in last night, here's the tape of she recorded it on tape. But they were really invested in it, and I guess it must have been because I was just speaking with such enthusiasm, or at the time it was so vivid. But
as you've gotten older, have the memories, I guess, kind of faded, kind of dissipated? Yeah. Yet the stories that were told to you, I don't know, it's kind of like when I was in psychology class, they would always say, oh, your earliest memories are just stories being told to you, I
feel like to an extent that's true, and I am very forgetful just generally. For me, I try to be present focused or whatever, and so but these kind of stories, thinking about even other events I've heard time and time again about from when I was a kid, and I think it's something that stays in your head, and as you experience these little things as you grow older, those memories are cemented and kind of recontextualized a little. So, for instance, I went to Belize and saw some other pyramids while I was down there, and I got this really rich feeling just being around that same architecture.
When you were older.
I did an archology dig for my field school.
Deja vu or anything?
Yeah, it was just this like really running up the steps again, and it was more so of like being a kid, not something I was maybe recalling
kind of
from
a nostalgic thing. Yeah. Do you remember? I mean, trying to run up the steps, was
that's the most
memories?
vivid one, just because they were so slick and they were so tiny, and I was really little too. So I'm climbing up something that's like 1.5 feet, 2 feet.
So like when you went back, did you think, wow, this is way smaller than what I remember?
Well, I unfortunately haven't been back to Palenque itself, but when I was visiting those other ruins in San Ignacio, it was the same architecture. It's not drastically different from one.
So what are there any more little details about you as a little kid there that just like your dad was just like taking back?
There was, and this is the conversations are the thing I remember the least, but this is another thing that happened while we were visiting Palenque, and I just finished freaking out about my treasure, and we come back out, and I'm telling my dad like, oh, this is so neat, but none of these are the right color. And my dad's like, what are you talking about? Why would they have painted these or what have you? And I'm like, well, this one was, and I think I was listing the colors like yellow, red, and blue or something like that. And an archaeologist on site or maybe another tour guide overheard that comment and was apparently had some sort of map or like document or something like that had outlined a similar color pattern matching up with those pyramids. But I don't know the source of that document or anything, and that's probably one of the fuzzier things to recall.
But by now, I guess all that paint's chipped off. It's not really. Yeah. But a long time ago, they were what? They were just brightly colored. Is that the idea?
I guess, or maybe they through whatever they were using to like map out their areas. Maybe that's where it was color coordinated and not necessarily the whole building being painted. But yeah, that's probably the fuzziest of any of that. That's something I whenever my dad tells a story, he always includes that tidbit as being like, this was the craziest part.
Yeah. Well, your dad has a better memory in terms of
for
being
sure.
an adult, and that's an incredible story. Did you ever hear? It was on ABC documentary.
That little boy in the airplane.
Yeah,
that's nuts. That's like such vivid memory recall. I mean, the little sister's name, all that stuff. Yeah, and to me, I'm a pretty spiritual person. I on some level believe in like reincarnation. I feel like, with as vivid as an experience as I had and other documents of similar kinds of things, I think there's some truth to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, having read some psychology like Carl Jung and his approach to the collective unconscious and these archetypes, I think that plays into it on some level too. But with the level of detail that kid had, I mean, that's just...
It's kind of mind-blowing. Do you know what your heritage is, your genetic background?
From what I understand, I am Welsh, European, and then like my mom is a 16th Cherokee.
Okay. The reason I asked, there was a really great book I had to read for my what was it? One of my psychology classes. It was called Islands of Genius. And it was mostly about people who were autistic and the genius side of autism.
Yeah.
And this is interesting. So as you're thinking about a kid and their brain developing. Well, when you have autism, what they're finding is that, not that saying that you have that, but just keep in mind what I'm saying here. But so the brain, I think it's like in the left cortex, I can't remember. It's been a while since I read that book, but only a very small portion of the brain is actually being used in a person with autism, even like on the genius scale. And so what they're thinking is the brain is having to overcompensate and use memory from like generations past in order to function. That's why some autistic people are really good with calendar calculating. Or some have maybe family like a long time ago who were musical geniuses, and it just happens to pop up. And even in people who have autism and it's acquired, like they had a car accident, and they had a brain injury, and they acquire autism from that, they can kind of do that as well. So it's like the brain's way of overcompensating. So a part of me is like, how much of that could just be like this random like genetic memory? Just those little stories are just kind of jaw-dropping. But then again, kids say some crazy stuff. And I wouldn't be surprised too if there was some psychic ability even. Kids' brains are still developing. Kids also see ghosts a lot because the brains are still developing. So there's really no telling.
Yeah, my mom said it was so fascinating to watch me like try to figure out what words to use. I'd never
like it was in a different language.
Yeah.
Like, how do I translate that?
Yeah, like all of a sudden I was gonna start speaking like some sort of indigenous tongue. It's just so crazy to try to think back to that, and really all I remember is like being in the bed looking at pictures. Like that's the only
Do y'all still have those pictures?
I would imagine my mom does. She's hoarded everything else in our lives.
Yeah, that's how moms are.
Soy un hombre del pueblo, harto de trabajar. Mi vida es el trabajo, paloma, pero me pagan mal. Las leyes están hechas a favor del patrón. La ley no escucha al pueblo, paloma, aunque tenga razón. Que no, paloma, no. Que así que no trabajo yo. Que no, palomita, que no.
COSM is all about Texas heritage and history, so come check out one of our sponsors, Riley's Tavern. It's one of the oldest bars in Central Texas with the very first liquor license after Prohibition. It's located about 2 miles from the York Creek exit off of I-35. There's live music, drink specials, a beer garden, pool tables, and lots of honky-tonk. Go to COSMRadio.org to find out how you can become a sponsor for this podcast.
Que no, paloma, no. Que así que no trabajo yo. Que no, palomita, que no. Que así que no trabajo.
I've always been really curious if, my experience was more almost pushed at in some ways by my parents questioning and how that is working out. And I was kind of curious and was going to ask you, you have a kid.
Yeah.
Has he had anything like that?
I've definitely been keeping an ear out. It's possible, but you know what? He's just a baby and he's not even 3 yet. However, I do have a cousin who, my cousin's ex-wife, when they had kids, they had 2, and she noticed with her son, he had a birthmark. And he was maybe, 5 years old at the time, and explained to his mom that he was killed in a card game, that he had cheated or something and got stabbed by a knife. And like, you can see the birthmark of where he got stabbed by a knife. Like
That's
pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, really vivid too.
And like, she also said that her daughter, who was maybe 2 at the time, she was in her room crying, and she goes to check on her, and she just was visually distraught. And she's asking her, "What's wrong, honey?" And she's like, I I just miss my granddaughter so much, you know? Like,
oh, wow.
Like, it was just kind of, you know, weird. And she herself had a sense, you know, that she had a different kind of connection with her daughter, like that she was more of a sister than a daughter, you know, just weird things like that that some people can pick up on. You know, but as life goes on, and maybe you notice that too, but just somehow the weird synchronistic journey that we are on, just the things that kind of add up. I mean, do you studied anthropology, right? I mean, do you ever wonder if like that experience kind of shaped you into that? I mean, I know that your parents are already kind of hippies, but did that have some kind of influence on you?
I would guarantee that it did.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I started learning about anthropology as like a field of study to begin with, you know, I just took cultural anthropology because I needed a social science class or whatever.
Right.
And I feel like I just was like, oh yeah, this'll do.
Yeah.
But I immediately fell in love with the approach because it, I guess in a lot of ways, was the manner in which my parents taught me to question the world, you know, is like, hey, don't be closed-minded to something. You know, you want to be smart in your approach to anything and diligent, but at the same time, don't think that you're always right. Don't, you know, try not to have bias in your approach.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would guarantee that my life was shaped pretty heavily by that influence. And my mom always was just talking to me about reincarnation, like all the time. Like she
what
thought
are her beliefs on it? Like, what does she think?
I mean, my mom is kind of hard to pin down on something like that. You know, she's not a religious person. My grandparents were, I think, Baptists or something like that. And
I mean, that was a thing back then.
yeah, everybody did it. We
something.
got sent to church one time for being bad. Like me and my sisters were just like being really just disrespectful or something like that. My mom was like, "You're going to church." That's it. And we went to this Baptist church down the street, and that was just kind of a silly experience. We ended up coming back just like calling each other heathens, and clearly did not work. So my mom never really pushed religion on us, but talked to us a lot about like Buddhism, and you know, we had like little shrines and stuff in the house, and that was kind of maybe more her wavelength of spirituality.
Yeah. Do you ever entertain the idea of, if you really were there, what may have happened to you, or what, you know, may have transpired during your life there, or what happened to your people?
Yeah, well, so you'd think that, you know, oh, I ended up in anthropology, I probably did like all these indigenous people studies, but I didn't whatsoever. I really just stuck more to the philosophical and like applied anthropology aspect of it, because I double majored in political science and anthropology, and you know, my goal was to, with that degree, like go out and be a politician basically. So I don't really know about like the fall of the Mayans or you know, any real significant historical markers from it, but from what I know, you know, or what I've heard, I guess, it sounds like there was this, you know, terrible feast famine kind of situation that occurred where, you know, you had the 1% or whatever taking advantage of all the like low level ground people. And it sounds like, you know, if I was that high priest position, you know, if you got to make a sacrifice that's gonna like turn the tides, you know, that's a pretty spiritual guy to throw away and to show the gods or whatever that you're serious about winning their favor. So I guess that's how I've always kind of contextualized that experience, maybe, as like, you know, it was an end of an era and, you know, they were just desperate.
So you hear memories like that. Unfortunately, we have understanding still that what you remembered, you know, these tour guides can be like, yeah, that happened. You know, he's right. You know, that's really awesome.
I just I don't know, I've all of a sudden found this relevant. You were talking about the kid that had the birthmark of the stab wound or whatever.
Supposedly, yeah.
When I was a kid, my birthmark was up here on my shoulder, and I don't have a birthmark anymore. And it was, I kid you not, it was a little red heart. And as I was about like 2 or 3 years old, I think it was pretty much gone by the time I was 5. But as I turned like 3 and 4, it started to fade. But before it faded, it got a crack right down the middle. And this is another thing my mom was like, this is so strange. What's going on?
Did she take Polaroids of it?
Yeah, there's a few pictures of it. And like of me as a baby, you can see this little dot on my arm. And I remember having that birthmark, but I don't have any dot or anything now from it. And
a lot of times they do fade.
Yeah.
Birthmarks fade, and so do the memories of what could be past lives. These were 2 really interesting stories for you this holiday season, and we hope you enjoyed it. COSM would like to thank our guests, Nancy and Max, for sharing with us such interesting personal stories. Coming up in January, we have stories about monsters and interviews with paranormal groups. And if we have the time, we'll get to some stories about activism as well. If you're tuning in locally, we will be hosting a COSM fundraiser on December 29th, an all-night art party to ring in the new year with manifestation cards or image boards, however you want to achieve your goals and dreams. If interested, send us a message through our Facebook page and we'll send you more info. COSM wants to share with you the best stories of today to older legends and folklore from Central Texas. So keep listening to COSMRadio. Stay safe this holiday season. Seriously, 2016 is like a ticking time bomb. But enjoy your spirits. Cheers!